Okay, Senate Bill 1, teacher evaluations and licensing. The building principal hires and fires teachers and all employees in the building. I don't know if all of you understand how it works now, but a building principal can't hire and fire anybody. Okay, they can make a recommendation to the superintendent, and he can't hire and fire him. He has to make a recommendation to the school board. The school board is the only entity under the law now that can hire and fire an employee of a school corporation. The principal can send him home, but the school board has to fire him. This says the building principal will do the hiring and firing with some consultation with the superintendent. All employees. No longer part of the master contract agreement, so there's no provision there that we can depend on. District corporation must publicly publish a summary of teacher evaluations by the number in each of the evaluation categories. They don't have to list it by names, but they have to list how many are effective, ineffective, need improvement, and so forth. There are 4 categories on the evaluation, and there they are. I just mentioned those, highly effective being obviously the best, and ineffective at the bottom. And by the way, the governor says there can't possibly be 90% teachers that are effective or highly effective in the state of Indiana. It can't be. And my question is, don't you have an expectation when you go to the doctor or the hospital, don't you kind of assume that they're all good enough to keep you alive? Because, why? Because they were trained and licensed and met the minimum requirements of the profession. Teachers do the same thing. It's nothing absurd to expect that 90% of the teachers in the classroom will be effective teachers. They should be, because that's what the licensing does. If they're not, it's not the license that's the problem. It's the principals or the evaluators or the people who have not addressed the problems. But I don't think it's illogical to expect that high percentage of people could be qualified for their job. There's no automatic pay for master's degrees. Currently, if you go back to school and reach a master's degree or higher levels, you move to the right on the salary schedule. You get a little bit of a bump for completing more training and becoming better at your job. This would take that away. Experience may count for only 33% of pay. So as you move down from 1 year to 2 years to 3 years experience, that can only be consideration, 1/3 of the consideration to do that. What we discovered in this bill now, and it's very shocking, and some of you caught me on the way in tonight, if you're a master's degree teacher and 25 to say 21 years experience, you're clear over here on the right side and you're down at the bottom, you've been there for 21 years and let's say you're making $50,000 a year. Under this law that says you will have to back up, clear to the left to the bachelor's column, and then back up 14 years to 1/3 of your experience. So you would go from a master's in 21 to a bachelor's in 7 in that pay scale. And someone tonight told me on the way in that she would lose, I think, $17,000 difference from where she's at right now under this plan. When I shared this with Senator Head yesterday, he acted kind of surprised, and he indicated that wasn't the intent of the bill. And I believe him. I don't think he was not an author, but I don't know that the author of the bill is willing to make the change. I got an email today that said the author did recognize that there might be some interpretation issues and that they will address them in the conference committees. But I'm telling you, as it stands right now, that's exactly what it says. And Tony Bennett doesn't get it yet. He still thinks that nobody will lose any money. No, you got it wrong. And he hasn't quite understood it yet. If you are rated needs improvement or ineffective, you cannot receive a pay increase in the next year. This includes the increment. Evaluations must be done yearly on every certificated employee. I'm going to tell you that most teachers are evaluated at least once a year. There are some cases where they're not, some by contract and some because the poor building principal just can't get it done. And they really can't. In a lot of cases, they can't do that. So they have a plan. They'll let teachers evaluate other teachers. The only problem with that is if we also end up with a merit pay system that the evaluator is in competition with the evaluee for the same dollar. What motivation would you have to evaluate your neighbor really good if you know they're going to get your merit pay? That also has a provision that outside agencies for-profit groups may be used for evaluations. If the school's got the financial ability to hire an outside company, they can do it, hire a for-profit company to come in and do that. Evaluations will be tied to student test scores and performance. That's a huge issue right now because we don't know exactly how that looks for I was a band director for 30 years. We don't have an I-step test in band. I would never, ever be eligible for a merit pay under that system. I don't even know how I would be evaluated because I don't have any assessments that are statewide or national level tests in band or choir or art or PE and all of those subjects. There's no provisions for the teachers to have input into that evaluation tool. It just is. The state has published a rubric for principals and teachers that we would be evaluated on. The State Board of Education will establish the evaluation criteria for teacher evaluations. They've already done that. Locals can develop their own evaluation, but it must be approved by the Indiana Department of Education. If your evaluation criteria is outside of what they want, then it cannot be used. And we have several locals, including Logansport, that have spent extensive time developing a local evaluation plan based on the state rubric, but reflecting local issues and things that they think are important here. If the state says that they won't approve it, then they'll have to adopt the one that the state gives them. And we don't know whether they're going to do that yet. It's too early to tell. Standard Advisory Board will be eliminated. This is the state standards board that we worked so hard to establish and was moved under the Indiana Department of Education several years ago. Lots and lots and lots of work went into that advisory board developing that. Teachers we put on a 2-year contract like the principals are now. Currently, permanent teachers have a continuous contract unless it's canceled for cause. Once you get to your 3rd year of teaching, you have an expectation by law that you'll get another contract unless they cancel it. It's not automatic, but unless they come back to you and say, you screwed up and we fire you, you have a contract the next year. That's called a continuous contract. It has to be canceled by action of the board rather than renewed by action of the board. Principals and superintendents operate a little differently. Principals operate on a minimum of a 2-year contract initially, and the superintendents on a 3-year contract, and those have to be renewed a little differently. Principals and other administrators may no longer be put back into the bargaining unit. And that's pretty significant in some places. Many administrators had been classroom teachers for many years. They get to the end of their careers and decided that the stress of the administrative job might be a little bit too much, or their family needs them or whatever, and they decide to take a position that comes open in the classroom and they go back. But they may no longer be put back in. And I don't know what the criteria, I have no idea how that's going to work or what the criteria are with it, but that's what the bill says. Teachers can be suspended without pay. Currently, teachers, if suspected of misconduct or if they're under investigation, must be suspended with pay pending an investigation. This new legislation allows the Board of Principal to suspend a teacher without pay and benefits for potentially extended periods of time. The reason for that is because if a child gets angry at Mrs. Smith in 3rd grade and goes home and tells mom, well, Mrs. Smith touched me today, and mom calls the school is going to suspend that teacher currently with pay. Teachers have targets on their back. It doesn't take a genius for an elementary kid to figure out, okay, if I want Mrs. Smith to be gone because I don't like her, all I got to do is just say she did something. Doesn't matter if she did. If I say it, the principal can suspend me without pay, and it's an indefinite time period. The due process time periods are not spelled out to complete the process. The board can leave you suspended without pay indefinitely. Would allow teachers to be recommended for termination at any time during the year. That's not the case now unless they commit a horrible crime. Insubordination, immorality, and incompetence, any teacher can be let go in the middle of a school year for those 3 items. Other things, less serious, they can discipline them and non-renew a contract at the end of the year. This would allow them to do it anytime. 2 weeks into the school year, they don't like you or whatever, you're done. A teacher requests a private conference, but the teacher is not guaranteed that it will even be granted. It says you may request, but it doesn't say you will be granted a conference to discuss and hear and give your side of the story. Principal gives written notice to the teacher of a cancellation. The teacher has 5 days to request the conference. The superintendent has 10 days to convene it. Then after the conference, the superintendent makes a written recommendation to the board. After the written recommendation has been made, the teacher has 5 days to request a conference. The board meets whenever they choose. Whenever they choose. No time frame. 6 months, 1 month. If they allow the conference at all, then at the next board meeting, the board determines the outcome. The board's decision is final. That system is ripe for abuse. And for personalities and issues other than things that should be involved in that decision to be part of it. Administration can drag this process on for as long as they wish. It is at the board's discretion when they meet. Meanwhile, the teacher would be on unpaid leave. Superintendent of public instruction may revoke a teacher's license at will. And that means at will. There is no appeal process. You just get a letter in the mail that says your teaching license has been suspended or revoked. There's no opportunity for you to give your side of the story. You can just simply do it at will. Okay, here's the list of other bills. I'm not going to explain any of these, but these are all, and this is in a handout that I think this is out there. Lots and lots of bills that relate to education. They have just absolutely come at us from every direction this year. Some of these are not bad. Some of these are probably good things, but there's so many of them right now, and they're in multiple areas, and we're discovering that the anti-bargaining stuff is over here, and it's over here in this vehicle bill, and it's over here someplace else, and they just keep coming at you from all directions. It's extremely difficult for us to figure out what's going on. The governor, on the day he gave his State of the State address, that's when most of these bills were filed at the last second so that no one could read them, no one could understand them, and offer any kind of intelligent testimony at the hearings. We've been scrambling since the end of January to try to keep up with all this. Very, very difficult.